How did the most feared voivode in the Romanian history avenge his brother? This event was not a simple bloodbath, but an ingenious operation of Vlad the Impaler to stabilize his reign, which was endangered by his numerous opponents. Apart from the Chronicle of Wallachia, these internal struggles were also recorded by German, Ottoman, and Byzantine authors, but they distorted them into a narrative mix that is difficult to decipher. Vlad voivod Țepeluș făcută un lucru cu orășanii de la Târgoviște, pentru că își dovedise că boierii târgovișteni i-au îngropat pe un frate al lui de viu. Și pentru că s-aflase adevărul, căutând pe frate să o îngroapă, l-au găsit cu fața în jos. Și când au fost în ziua de Paște, fiind toți orășanii la ospețe, iar cei tineri la hore, așa fără de veste, pe toți au cuprins-o. Deci, câți au fost oameni bătrâni, pe toți i-au înțepat. De-a ocolit târgul cu dânsii, iar câți au fost tineri cu nevestele lor, cu juni, cu fete mari, așa cum au fost împodobiți în ziua Paștilor, pe toți i-au dus la poenari, de-au lucrat la cetate până li s-au spart toate hanele pe dânsii și au rămas toți goi în piei. De aceea i-au scos numele Țepeluși. Greetings, my name is Adrian Gheorghe, I'm a professional historian and part of the research project Corpus Draculianum, which aims at editing all medieval sources of any kind from and about Vlad the Impaler Dracula. I encourage you to do His Majesty will, to subscribe to this channel without forgetting to impale that warning bell in order to be notified each and every time we release something new. I have quoted from the Chronicle of Wallachia, written more than 2 centuries after the events, in which the origins of the nickname of Vlad III are explained. Contrary to today's perception, the most dangerous enemies of Vlad the Impaler in his early years were not the Ottomans, but Christians in his immediate proximity in Wallachia and Transylvania. The Draculești line, Vlad's family, had threatened the political and economic interest of many powerful and wealthy groups. The opposition, Wallachian landlords, who wanted to confiscate the estates of Draculești party, that is his family and loyalists, and the Transylvanian Saxons, who wanted exception from paying customs duties in Wallachia for their many products. They needed Vlad to be eliminated, as they had done 10 years earlier with Vlad Dracul, his father, and Mircea, his elder brother. Vlad the Impaler was not an easy target to remove, and like a real godfather, as he had become in the meantime, he knew all too well how to settle all family business, as he was to show in the most horrible way to those responsible for the death of Mircea, executed like a common criminal at the order of the council members of Târgoviște. In 1446, Vlad Dracul has been forced to side with the Ottomans again after the failure of the Crusade of Varna 2 years earlier. The Sultan had offered to free his young sons, Vlad and Radu, who were being held hostage in exchange for his submission. On the other hand, the voivode was also in tense relations with Iancu of Hunedoara, or János Hunyadi in Hungarian, the governor of Hungary, who refused any compensation for the damages caused by his soldiers on the way to Varna feared a Hungarian invasion. Under these circumstances, Sultan Murad II made an offer he couldn't refuse. However, it was too late. Iancu's military strength and the legitimation of the throne contender Vladislav II, who had taken refuge in Transylvania, had already set in motion a plot to eliminate all Draculian family members. In December 1447, the Council of Târgoviște, subjects of the voivode but part of the conspiracy, had to eliminate Vlad Dracul and his sons in the court of the city. This should have happened while Iancu and Vladislav attacked from the north by surprise. These council members, most likely, were not Romanian ethnics, but Transylvanian Saxons, that is, German ethnics. This was not surprising at that time, since a considerable part of the elites in the towns of Wallachia and Moldavia were Germans and Hungarians, as well as Jews and Romanians. It is well known that Transylvanian Catholic Saxons founded the Wallachian town of Câmpulung and continued to monopolize local business and administration, while also maintaining close links across the mountains. Finally, the plotters managed to get their hands on Mircea, who ruled with his father Vlad II, and, after torturing and blinding him, they threw him into a simple pit and buried him alive, without any ceremony worthy of his high rank. Although Vlad II managed to escape with his younger sons, Vlad and Radu, and sought help from the Ottomans, their father was caught and executed in the village of Bălteni in the county of Dâmbovița, either because their father has covered up their escape or because they had been quick-footed. Vlad and Radu managed to reach the Ottoman-held fortress of Giurgiu and went from there safely back into the empire, where they had been held earlier as a guarantee of their father's good behavior. The lesson learned from this was simple. Without firm control of the internal affairs in the capital of Târgoviște, a voivode could easily be ousted with help from over the mountains. A lesson that dominated Vlad's brutal reactions 1 decade later. The reign of Vlad the Impaler stood from the very beginning under the malicious suspicion of many high-ranking noblemen towards the Draculești family and towards the one they perceived as the Little Dracula. They undermined his authority by withholding sufficient military support. The Transylvanian Saxon merchants wanted free access with no custom taxes until the Danube and the Black Sea. In order to force the hand of the voivode, they sheltered his opponents, pretenders to the throne of Wallachia, a strategy that their partners in Târgoviște were probably not unfamiliar with. Underestimated by his adversaries, Vlad's major objective was not just to execute his brother's killers in a violent and degrading manner, but also to strengthen his position. On 24th of April, St. George Day, he was expected in the Sultan's palace for the handover of the tribute, haraj in the Ottoman language, for his first year of rule, 1456-57, and, of course, confirmation of his loyalty. If by then he had not managed to fully control those who made the games in Târgoviște, he would run the risk of repeating his father's tragedy. The voivode's plan, although unorthodox, was efficient. He was going to take advantage of the peace and quiet of the Eastern holidays, probably accompanied by a not very large number of his retinues. The voivode was in Târgoviște on Easter Sunday, 16th of April, where he ceremoniously handed over a Hristov, that is a charter, with privileges to the abbot of Kozia Monastery. No one expected violence in the holiest week of the year. The next day, on 17th of April, 12 convicts were arrested at the Easter feast with their families. Because they weren't boyars, Vlad inflicted on them the most severe punishment for treason. Why? You can see it here. German propaganda stories exaggerated the status of these council members, wanting to label the voivode as a tyrant with no respect for the laws of the civilized societies. More credible, however, is the claim of later Wallachian chroniclers that impaling was applied for the first time in local history on this occasion. Placing the 12 stakes around the town was a demonstration of power. It would also serve a more preventive purpose by threatening any existing or potential opponents. This is probably the episode visualized in the edition of the German stories published more than 40 years later in 1499 in Strasbourg. The episode described in these stories must have echoed and resulted from a mixture of various reports circulating about the bloody Easter day of 1457. By deporting the patrician families of Târgoviște and by subjecting them to hard labor, using them in the building of the fortress of Poenar, Vlad cut all relations of this social stratum and installed his men in key positions. Now, the voivode could go to the Sultan with relief. Satisfied with generous gifts and thus assured of the new voivode's good intentions, the clerics probably did not react too vehemently to the bloody staining of the holiest Christian feast of the year. In deep control over the capital, and thus the stability of the reign was also an argument in negotiations with the Ottoman Porte, on which he now thought he no longer depended so badly. The success of the impalements and the shockwaves they sent had increased the authority of the ruler, who was now no longer considered merely a transient one, but, to be honest, with somewhat less authority, as His Majesty used to end his Slavonic letters. I can wish you too. May God rejoice over you. Bye.